Well, hello to all of you who are watching this via or via, however you say that, the replay. If you're watching this via the replay on YouTube or you're watching it via replay on Facebook, my name is Corey, and I am first and foremost, I'm a husband and I'm a father, and I am an outspoken advocate for racial justice and I would say for inclusion in spiritual, religious space as well as in the corporate space. So that's who I am. You are welcome to subscribe to the YouTube channel. You're welcome to be my friend here on Facebook if you're watching it on Facebook. I would love to connect with you. You're welcome to comment below. You're welcome to share this video. I encourage you to share it. In fact, if you are coming in live on Facebook or you've stumbled across this on YouTube, feel free to share this with your friends, your family, with anyone that you know of. Let me say hi for those of you watching later. I'm going to say hi to folks that are coming in. Hello, B. Hey, Chanico. What's up, Don? Good to see all of you. Glad you guys are here. Please feel free to share this with, again, anyone. You can hit the share button. If you can, on YouTube, you can share this link with folks. I think what I'm about to share with you is going to be important for you to share with if you are white, it's important for you to share with other white folks who may be in your circle. If you're a person of color, and I'm sure if you're like me, you have white folks asking you questions, this will be sort of an answer to some of the questions that you may get. What's up, Tabitha? Hello to all of you. Glad you guys are here. So let me start by saying something I said on a previous live video that I did yesterday, I want to say. And I talked about how whenever you experience grief in your life, whether like if there's a loss in the family. 3 years ago, my dad passed away. And when my dad passed away, for the first week or two or month or so, there were people checking in all the time. People going, how are you holding up? How you doing? I'm praying for you. Do you guys need anything? Yada, yada, yada. So if you've ever lost someone in your family, you know that that is how that works. That's how the process goes. People are there in the beginning, and then it is kind of human nature for that support to fade away, and only the people who are closest to you at that point begin to, stay around to ask you. I have a good friend actually who's here in the comments on Facebook. But again, if you're watching on YouTube, you won't see that, but who every year since his dad has passed, he feels that thing. And I can say that for me, that every year around my dad passed away in February, my body knows that the trauma is coming. So I start to feel a heaviness going into that. And only people who've experienced that kind of know what that is. And sort of, if you have relationships with people, you can kind of check in on each other. Well, I feel like what's happening right now in America is this. Everyone witnessed the most horrific, imaginable instance of white supremacy, blatant lynching of Ahmaud Arbery. We all saw that. I haven't seen the video. I encourage anybody who hasn't seen the video to not watch it. I think there's a certain degree of hate crime pornography, is what I'll call it, that our society kind of has a hunger and a thirst for, where this thing becomes this thing to watch, but we all know the story. Many of us have seen the video, and white folks were outraged over it because it was the kind of racism that a lot of white folks deem as normal. It's like, this is the kind of racism that that's what racism looks like. That is what we expect it to look like. That's what it's always been. And that's what we're talking about when we talk about racism. It's easier to stomach that as racism because that's over there somewhere in the backwoods of Georgia, and not the systemic racism that you find in boardrooms and in the background that I come from. You also find this coming from pulpits in America. That backwoods racism is easier to talk about, so it's one that a lot of folks have come forward to talk about, and that's why I say it feels like the beginning stages of a loss in the family. When in the early stages of grief, there's a lot of people who are there. And the further away you get from proximity to the tragedy or proximity to people who are dealing with it, the easier it is for you to just go, that's I have to go. I'm going on with my life. I'm no longer concerned with that particular grievous situation. And what I want to say to the white folks who ran today, you ran in solidarity with people of color in this country who are grieving and outraged over what happened. You went out, put on some running shoes. Maybe you don't even run at all, but you went out, you got some friends together and you socially distanced from one another and you did a run and you took a picture and you uploaded that and you said, I ran with Iman today. Awesome. I'm glad you did that. Or you got on social media yesterday, or you got on social media today and you were outraged and you were posting how racism is wrong and something has to happen in this country and things have to change and yada, yada. You said all those things and they're all good things to say. Great. You said those things. There is a moment where everyone wakes up to the things that other activists and outspoken advocates of social justice and racial justice have been saying every day of their lives. Every day there's a post, every day there's a comment. I'm going to name some of those folks toward the end of this post. There are those things that people are saying all the time that maybe just now you're waking up to, because there's a moment for all of us that wakes us up. Great. So you're awake now. Now what? And if I get asked this question quite a bit, I was asked this question again today. I'm going to answer this question one time for myself and also for anyone else who was asked this question. That way, especially if you're a person of color, it's grievous right now to have to walk white folks through what do we do about this? Like it's not something that feels great when you're dealing with the trauma of, you know what, it could have been me going for a run that lost his life. It could have been one of my daughters going for a run. It could have been my wife. So when you start to think that way and feel that as a person of color, it is extra grievous to have to go the extra mile of going, let me help my white brothers and sisters know what to do next. So I'm answering this for everyone who's texts, everyone who messages. Here is what I think you can do about this moving forward if you want to stay in this process. First thing you can do is become an outspoken advocate. You can, if you are a person with any amount of influence, if you're a mom or a dad in a household, if you are mom and mom or dad and dad in a household, if you are a executive in a boardroom, if you are a police officer, if you are a school teacher, a principal, whatever position you hold of influence, become an outspoken advocate of racial equality. Addressing the issues of implicit bias, like the little things that lead to the bigger institutions that allow for a human being to feel empowered enough, first of all, to expect a Black man to stop running because they said so. You don't roll out of bed with that kind of mentality. That is instilled, that is principle, that is taught, that is reinforced by structures and constructs that are reinforced through media, reinforced through education, reinforced through well, quite frankly, through our politics right now. That's not something you roll out of bed with. So if you're a person who has influence and you're white, become an outspoken advocate. Become somebody who speaks up. Become become a person who understands how to engage in bystander intervention. Like become a person who when you see something happening, you say something. When you recognize that the Black person in your company who speaks up in the meeting is consistently spoken over, say something. Be an advocate. Use some bystander intervention and go, hey, I noticed that whenever Dante brings up an idea, we tend to talk over Dante. I noticed that whenever Sabrina brings up an idea, we don't really run with that unless Kyle also has that idea, like, because these are things that we know are happening. This is not, these are things we know are consistently happening on a regular basis. So if you're a person who says, hey, I was outraged by that form of racism that I saw in the backwoods of Georgia, and I don't know what to do, one of the first things you can do is become an outspoken advocate. Put yourself at risk. Put yourself in a position where you become a real ally by standing next to someone. Here is one of the ways you can put your body in a position of being an outspoken advocate. This is not my story to tell. It's not my experience, I should say, but I was listening to Bree Newsom, who is one of the black folks who you should be following, and knowing who she is. I watched her speak at my friend Michael McBride's church, and she shared a story of how she climbed a flagpole to take the Confederate flag down. And she went to do this, and with her at her side was a white man who, when the police showed up to tase Bree Newsom, who was taking the flag down, the police have pulled out their tasers, and mind you, she's on a metal pole and she's climbed it to take down this Confederate flag. The white guy who was with her at the bottom of the flagpole also grabbed that flagpole so that his fate would be bound with Bree Newsom's fate. That is the kind of advocacy, the kind of allyship that Black folks are asking for. Let your well-being and my well-being be bound together. Second thing you can do, you might say, hey, I don't have a voice. I don't have a huge platform. I don't know how to speak up. I'm not as articulate or well-spoken, or haven't done enough research to understand how to speak up about race and racism. Well, here's an easy thing that you can do if you're in a position to do so. I realize that everyone's not in a position to do so. So if you're a person who's not in a position to do this, I'm not saying this for you to feel guilty or for you to not pay your bills. Don't pay your light bill or your cable bill so that you can support some people of color who are doing the work. But if you are in a position to do so, if you make decisions for a nonprofit, if you make decisions for a church, when it comes to how they use their finances, now is one of those moments where you and your team should be having a conversation about moving forward. Here's what we are going to do. We have, in the same way that Corona has put us in a position where we're never going to truly be the same again. We're not going to be a people who don't wash our hands anymore. I can't imagine if you were a person who wasn't a regular hand washer before, which there's a lot of people who weren't that. If you weren't a regular hand washer before, I can't imagine going back to a day where we don't wash our hands, or where we're out in public for quite a while. We're going to be wearing masks. Things have changed because of Corona. Well, if you are a person who really wants to move forward and see a different world than the one we live in, if you actually want to be a contender for a better world, things can't go back to the same. They can't go back to the way that they used to be. So if you're a decision maker right now at a church, you can go to your team, and right now you're probably meeting virtually, and you say, listen, here's what we're going to do. We're putting a flag in the ground right now, right here, where we are no longer going to do business as usual when it comes to racial injustice in this country. If I got to put a task force together of people who are finding the leading voices and the leading resources and materials out there that can help us be an organization that's completely diverse and inclusive, then that's what we need to do. But you got to put your money where your mouth is. And there are plenty of Black and brown folks who are daily engaged in the work of anti-racism advocacy, anti-racism training, anti-racism talks like the one I'm giving right now. There are people who you can support. Okay, and I'm going to list some of those names in the comments for you guys, but I'll just say them out loud. And if you want to take notes, you can write down their names. First and foremost, there's the guy you're watching right now. You can join my Patreon community. If you have not joined my Patreon community, the link again will be here for you to join that community, and you can become a financial supporter of this work that I'm doing right now. These things that I'm saying right now that I have been saying on a regular basis for the last 3 years, that I've been advocating for this, you can become a supporter. If you've not already, you can do that. There are other people like Andre Henry, who is in large part a mentor of mine in this work. Andre Henry and the Hope and Heart Pills community, which I'm also a part of, which I also help to curate the work that comes out of that group. You can become a supporter of them. You can join the email list that Andre puts out. There are people like Allie Kinney. I already mentioned Bree Newsom, Michael and Ben McBride, Sean King. There are people that have been saying, speaking, advocating for the truth of racial justice for a long time. And they are people that you need to follow and need to be connected to and need to be following their work. Last thing I'll say about this before I go, thank you guys for listing the names, by the way, in the comments there. Bree Newsom, Andre Henry, Michael, and Ben McBride. There is Tina Strawn, TinaStrawn, that is doing amazing work in this and has been doing it for some time. Lots of folks, if you don't subscribe to the podcast, the Existential podcast, anyone that I've spoken to on the Existential podcast is someone whose work you should be following and supporting if you're in a position to do so. Last thing I'll say about this before I wrap, and thank you guys for sharing and for being here and staying with me through this conversation. I really appreciate that. The last thing I want to say to you about this is if you are a white person who is in some position of authority or leadership, especially faith-based, and I want to speak specifically to those of you in the faith-based community because that is that's the community that I come out of. That is where I hail from. That's where I've cut my teeth in my professional life. If you are a person out there who runs a predominantly white church and you have kind of stayed clear of folks like me who are very outspoken about issues of race and who say things that make you and potentially your church uncomfortable, that's fine if you want to continue to avoid that because you need to keep your ship afloat. And when I say fine, I mean that a little bit rhetorically. That's your prerogative to do that. Here's what I would say to you. It is better that you say nothing at all and that you continue to keep your ship afloat than to go looking for folks that are talking about race because it's in the news cycle. It's very important you hear me when I say this. There are folks who start talking about race and racism because it's in the news cycle and because it's something that they have to talk about now because they're communicators and they want to help. And when there's something happening in the world, they decide to talk about that thing. And I'm not demonizing them for saying it. Some of these folks are black, some of these folks are white, but we've all seen that there are folks who have now come out of hiding, if you will, to have something to say about this. Now, I would admonish you that if you're going to have a conversation with your church or in your church or with your staff about race and racism, bring the folks in to talk about that who actually talk about that, who actually who have put that flag in the ground and said, this is something that I'm going to do research on. This is something that I'm going to do work on. I'll never forget when I had Andre Henry on my podcast, and he said that I did three things after, I think it was after Alton Sterling said I committed to no longer let the news cycle dictate when I would talk about race. I decided to put my body into the efforts of anti-racism, and I decided to learn everything that I could possibly learn about it. When people have done that work, those are the folks you should bring in to talk to your church. Those are the people who you should be paying to speak at your church. Those are the people who you should be paying to do seminars, who you should be going to ask questions. And I know that it's uncomfortable because some of the things that they're saying are challenging to you, but those are the folks we should be recommending. It's fine that you've got great communicators who can communicate about anything in a generic way. But when we're trying to do the real work of undoing, undermining, and eliminating for future generations the white supremacist stronghold that there is in America that leads to redlining, that leads to the disproportionate number of black and brown bodies that are locked up in prisons, that leads to even a global pandemic having a larger impact and a deadlier fingerprint on communities of color than it does on white folks. When we're seeing these things that are happening as a result of white supremacy, those things are not going to go away because you have a great communicator with only a shallow well when it comes to talking about this issue. All right, folks, thank you so much. If you have shared this, I totally appreciate you sharing it. If you have become a Patreon supporter after watching this video of myself or any of the people that I named, if you found a way to support them financially, thank you so much. I appreciate that. That is what you can do. So if you have someone who asks you, what can I as a white person do? Share this video with them. And I think that I've given you enough to think about and things you can do. All right, guys, God bless, grace and peace. I'll see you next time.